This is a sham document. This is not what Newt Gingrich offered Bill Clinton. The media, the Democrats, are lying again. That's all they do. The president did the right thing in terms of Ukraine and asking about Biden. More tomorrow. Let not your heart be troubled. We'll never be the media mob. Here's Laura Ingraham. How are you?
Hannity, I'm great. And I got to say, for Americans who voted for President Trump, they voted for a different type of foreign policy, one that was grounded in pragmatism and realism. It was more prudent. It was less just throw money at countries where we didn't have a real good handle on whether they were dealing with corruption or human rights. And that's what people want. And if the Democrats want to have a different type of foreign policy, well, they can actually elect someone who will campaign on more war and more foreign aid and see how far that gets them. But I have a feeling they won't be running their campaigns like that way. It's
interesting because Trump beat back the caliphate. I haven't heard one Democrat said, Mr. President, great job on Baghdadi. I'm going to tell you another thing. I'm glad the president was trying to get to the bottom of Ukraine election interference. And somebody needs to get to the bottom of the Biden's quid pro quo corruption. That is not a conspiracy theory. That's actual truth.
Well, the Democrats used to care about corruption. And they actually cared about fighting corruption. But when it's a Republican trying to do it, well, forget it. All bets are off. Great show tonight, Hannity, as always.
Laura, have a great show.
All right, I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from another busy Washington tonight. In moments, I'm going to deliver an important and pointed message to the U.S. Senate, specifically Republicans, about what steps can and should be taken at this impeachment sham and as it moves forward. Along the way, I'll be joined by John Eastman, Robert Ray, House Judiciary Ranking Member Doug Collins. Plus, I'm going to explain how Congress can actually play a role in stopping this intel and diplomatic bureaucracy from continuing to defy this duly elected president and presidents in the future. Tom Fitton, Chris Swecker are both here on that. Also tonight, Democrat Katie Hill resigned after Congress found out she was sleeping with two subordinates. So why is the media now painting her as a damsel in distress, victim of the vast right-wing conspiracy? Well, does that sound familiar? The can't-miss debate on that a little later on in the show. But first, McConnell's time to stand and fight. That's the focus of tonight's angle. The House Democrats running, it's kind of like a mystery impeachment theater. They think they finally found their star witness. Army vet Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, a Purple Heart recipient and a White House NSC staffer. While we, of course, salute Vindman's service to this country, that service does not insulate him or any member of the armed services from criticism or scrutiny, especially when they're still on active duty. And let's face it, if the lieutenant colonel had been on the call and dismissed any wrongdoing by the president, Democrats and the media probably wouldn't sound like this.
A hero who has dedicated his entire life to the United States of America.
The lieutenant colonel who's a patriot.
This is an American hero, cares about the country.
I've never met him, but he is a hell of a patriot.
Remember what they've done to Tulsi Gabbard? She served Ollie North. I mean, we got a lot of people who've served in uniform who the Democrats found plenty of fault with over the years. But what's really striking is how formulaic this has all become. Number one, witness testimony is leaked to select media outlets. Last night, the media was going gaga about Vindman. Number two, witness appearance is hyped as a bombshell.
We'll begin with that bombshell breaking news story.
A bombshell opening statement.
Bombshell testimony on Capitol Hill.
This is a very, very important moment.
And three, media forecasts doom for Trump. This headline from NBC is typical. Extremely disturbing. Top Democrats alarmed over Vindman's testimony on Trump-Ukraine call. But remember, despite the relentless press buildup, the public is still left in the dark, and even Republicans inside the interview room today who were trying to question Vindman were shut down.
It seems interesting to me that chairmanship is so sensitive. Our witness today is under subpoena. He's supposed to answer the questions from members of the United States Congress, not just members from the majority of the United States Congress.
He's directing witnesses not to answer questions that he doesn't want the witness to answer. He's not cut off one Democrat.
Complete outrage, very frustrating. But then over in the Senate, where Republicans are in the majority, there are more options. And the Senate Majority Leader must start using his power to stand up against the Democrats' political reign of terror. This is McConnell's moment. He needs to show the American people that the GOP stands united behind the man that they elected to lead this country, run our foreign policy, help advance our economy. McConnell needs to make sure that every Republican keeps pressure on Pelosi, Schiff, and Schumer. His resolution with Lindsey Graham was a very good start. And as for a possible impeachment trial, McConnell must also stop acting like his hands are tied. Now, it is true that there are current rules governing how impeachment is done. Those rules have largely been unchanged for decades and decades. Probably time for some updating, don't you think? Well, right now, the rules require that a trial begin the day following the Senate's receiving the articles of impeachment. Chief Justice of the United States John Roberts will preside. The Senate can compel the attendance of witnesses. The person impeached could then be called to appear and answer the articles of impeachment against him, among other rules. Well, there is some contention, though, about how hard it would be for McConnell to change these rules. But I will say this. These times require extraordinary measures. The House Democrats have decided to launch a partisan hit on a sitting president using members of the foreign policy establishment to trigger a bogus process. Voters are supposed to cheer, though, as Republicans in the Senate respond with, what, there's nothing we can do to stop this madness? Republicans aren't going to cheer that. They're frustrated. And at the very least, McConnell can and should aggressively push for a blisteringly short impeachment trial. Giving Democrats maybe an afternoon to put on their sham case, I think that's too generous. If impeachment can be carried out like this one by just one party driving it, with testimony done in secret based on one phone call without a quid pro quo or any underlying criminal intent, our republic is at risk. Future presidencies are at risk.
This should never happen to our country again, and this should never happen to a president again. The Washington Post puts out a story, I guess on Inauguration Day, essentially saying, and now the impeachment begins.
Republicans in the Senate need to step up or get out. If Democrats can impeach a president under these facts in a Star Chamber process, and your response is, we're powerless, then maybe you didn't deserve the majority in the first place. Because if Democrats take Congress, let alone the presidency in 2020, they'll kick off a multi-year revenge tour on red state America. They're going to take more than our money. They're going to take our freedom. They'll brainwash our kids. They'll pack the courts. And then they might even turn off the electricity just for good measure. And the things you care about, like the economy, the rule of law, securing our borders, they're going to ignore all of that. And at the same time, maybe take the shirt off your back while they're at it. There is no reason to drag the country through damaging, partisan impeachment proceedings predicated not on legal grounds, but on pure, sheer hatred for Trump. The fate of Trump's presidency should be left up to the voters next November. Trust the people. We do. And that's the angle. Here now to respond, John Eastman, a constitutional law scholar, professor at Chapman University School of Law, and Robert Ray, former Whitewater independent counsel. John, there's a lot of debate on what McConnell can do regarding the rules. What is your take?
Well, you know, the rules can be changed by a majority. We saw that when the Democrats were in charge, when they changed the rules on filibusters for the D.C. Circuit, for example. It just takes the political will to do it. But even without that, there's a lot of going on here that I think they ought to be conducting hearings about. We've got evidence now that somebody in the White House leaked to a member of our CIA information on a confidential call within the White House. Why isn't that being investigated? It was just preposterous in the whistleblower complaint that he said, oh, I learned of this in my normal duties. Does the normal duties of somebody over at the CIA include spying on the president's phone calls in the White House? I mean, these are the kind of things that we ought to be looking at, and nobody seems to be doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shock, frankly, that the Senate, with a healthy majority, is not putting the pressure on this, buried bureaucracy who seems to be trying to run their own little fiefdoms over at the White House and at the intel agencies. And as John mentioned, our Catherine Herridge says that the big question is who Colonel Vindman shared his concerns with.